The Shameless Picture Show is part of the Cinepunks Network. If you like The Shameless Picture Show and you want to hear other great shows like it, make sure you check out the Cinepunks Network. You can find them at www.cinepunks.com. That's CINEPUNX. There's other great shows such as Cinepunks. There's The Carnage Report, Cinema Smorgasbord, Fat Girl Hacks, Loud, Fast, Philly, Tomb of Ideas, and Twitch of the Death Nerve, and so much more. If you like punk rock and you like movies, make sure to go to www.cinepunks.com. And let's not forget the sponsors for the Cinepunks Network. We have the Lehigh Valley Apparel Creations. They are the premier screen printer of the Lehigh Valley with service to the whole country, professional and personable in a way that only a DIY business can be. They also have ridiculously low prices for whatever your screen printing needs may be. You can visit them online at xlvacx.com. That's xlvacx.com. Lehigh Valley Apparel Creations. We also have the Essex Coffee Roasters. All their coffee is roasted to order. They have high quality beans, bunch of apparel, and tea available. They are bringing high quality coffee to the masses without the pretentiousness. Use the code CINEPUNKS for 10% off your first order. You can visit them at www.essexcoffeeroasters.com. That's ESSEX, coffeeroasters.com. Once again, use the code CINEPUNKS for 10% off your first order. This episode is also brought to you by Paramount Pictures. Paramount Pictures is a legendary producer and global distributor of filmed entertainment since 1912. Paramount Pictures' library consists of more than 1,000 film titles with rights to an additional 2,500, featuring films by Hollywood's most respected filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, J.J. Abrams, and Michael Bay, among others. Paramount Pictures' library consists of more than 1,000 films, including such classics as Star Trek, Godfather, and Indiana Jones franchises, Academy Award winners Braveheart, Forrest Gump, and Titanic, and current favorites such as the Mission Impossible and Transformers franchises. Paramount Pictures distributes its titles on DVD and Blu-ray through Paramount Home Entertainment. We are happy to have them. We fucking love Paramount Pictures.
Good evening. I'm Luce, and on dark and eerie nights like this, I can't help but think about Halloween. I'm so sick of Halloween celebrations being limited to a few weeks out of the year. That's why I created It's Always Halloween, a year-round podcast on which I'll dive deep into the dark history of our favorite horror-filled holiday. Each episode will explore one specific custom, fear, or fright, inspired by my own curiosity and listener queries. If you have a Halloween question you need answered or just want to share a Halloween memory, call my All Hallows hotline at 802-532-DEAD. Or you can write me an email at it'salwayshalloweenpodcast@gmail.com. Tune in if you dare.
This movie podcast actually discusses movies. Be aware that it may discuss any of the following elements: endings, surprise twists, unexpected cameos, and all manner of spoilers. If this doesn't appeal to you, why listen to a movie podcast? Without further ado, please enjoy our feature presentation, The Shameless Picture Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Shameless Picture Show. I am your host, Michael Viers, and today I am being joined by a very special guest, a guest that I met a couple months ago. Today I am being joined by the filmmaker behind the documentary about the Kevin Smith film Chasing Amy. The film is called Chasing Amy, and I've got Sav Rodgers here hanging out with me, talking about filmmaking, talking about movies, talking about a little bit of everything. How you doing today, Sav?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
I thank you for agreeing to come hang out with me. I feel like this has been a couple months in the making. You're a very busy guy, and I appreciate you carving out a little bit of time for me.
That is very kind of you to want to have me on your show, but also we're all busy. The world is really exhausting right now on a number of
It is.
levels, and I'm really glad that we could make it happen. I'm always happy to talk about movies with people, and I'm always flattered when people want to talk about a movie I made.
Definitely. And as of right now, is this the only movie you've made, or?
So, I mean, it's an interesting question because, I did a lot of like student work beforehand. I did short films that,
Mhm.
like were, you know, I look back and I'm like, oh, all I can see is like what was wrong with them, even though they're, products of relentless collaboration and things to be proud of. But yeah, in some ways, like this is my first feature. And it took, if we're counting the distribution process of it, it's taken over 6 years to get to this point with the film. And so it's taken up a significant amount of real estate in my 10-year journey as a filmmaker. And I've written other things, and I've worked on a lot of other things, but this is the only film by Sav Rodgers in terms of like a credit. So far, I'm working my ass off to try to get the next thing made, but it's hard out there.
It is. It is. Like I touched on it a little bit ago. I'm a filmmaker myself, and at this point, I've only done shorts because it's so, as you know, it's so hard to get a feature made. Um, so your experience, like I said, your film Chasing Amy is not just a movie about chasing Amy. It's a movie about yourself. And it's a movie that I thought was a very beautiful film, and I was really touched by it when I saw it. So we're going to try to avoid spoilers on this show, but we might touch on things that are touched on in the documentary. But I'm hoping maybe it's some stuff that we can expand upon.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this question. Your relationship with filmmaking. So I know your relationship with Chasing Amy goes back very far, and you might have touched on this in the documentary. But when did the seed get planted that you wanted to be a filmmaker?
It's a good question, and thank you for the kind words about the film. That means a lot. And the bug was planted when I really saw Chasing Amy. I was always like a pop culture obsessed kid. I worshipped at the idol of Star Wars and Full House, right? But I
I love that combo.
look, in some ways it's still my taste. No, but when I saw Chasing Amy, it was the first time that it really dawned on me that somebody had to go make the movies. I was 12, and I was obsessed with sports and pop culture and all these things. And um, when I saw Chasing Amy, it was the first time that filmmaking felt approachable to me because it hit me on such a sincere, heartfelt level. That I love you speech in the car.
Mhm.
The ways that it depicted love and loss. These were things that I felt or thought I could feel as a kid, and eventually, I would grow to resonate with like its LGBTQ, themes and its depiction of Hooper and Melissa and things like that. But that was, I was a pop culture obsessed geek. Holden and Banky were pop culture obsessed geeks, and so that was like the surface level entry point for me. And again, it was the first time that it felt like an approachable thing to be a filmmaker, to get to tell stories. I was always writing when I was a kid. It was a creative outlet for a kid who had a lot of imagination and not much place to put it. And so it would be I think for my 12th birthday I got a video camera, and I remember I would like shoot stuff with the video camera, and I would look at the playback and I was like, what the fuck? This does not look like a movie. What am I missing? you know, didn't have the budget for a gaffer back then, and I, I felt this dissonance between what I aspired to do and where I thought my taste could be or where I thought it should be, and where my skill level was, and that was like the uphill battle for so much of my early creative endeavors was I dreamed big, but there's that Ira Glass quote. Who he talks about most artists quit before their skills catch up with their taste, and I've been perennially trying to catch up with the types of movies that I dreamed about making. And in so many ways, Chasing Amy was my dream movie. It was this ambitious, highly specific idea that I was convinced that I could persuade other people to care about talking about Chasing Amy with me. But I just didn't get there through any means that I had previously thought about. And I certainly didn't think that I was going to end up in the movie, let alone be the primary participant that we follow through the process.
So I want to touch on, it's funny, we actually have a very similar background when it comes to what got us into filmmaking.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, I think you being part of that documentary is just kind of what sealed it in terms of going from being a making of Floating Head documentary to being something so much more. So I'm glad you made that decision.
Yeah. It was
And
tough.
I think I feel like it's the Kevin Smith choice. It's what he. I feel like it's his films have such an inherent heart to them, and you putting yourself into the film, even though it wasn't intentional, added these layers of heart that I found myself resonating with when I was sitting in that theater.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we go to the movies to empathize with another person, whether or not we realize it. And, early on in the process, I had made peace that I would be in the film like a little bit, but I did not think that it was going to be at this scale. And so the reference point that I always used was Bing Lu's Minding the Gap. Which I thought was a perfect amount of Bing Lu in that movie. It was heartfelt, it was incredible, but you also had all of those other people in the film to connect to throughout the story. And so, as time went on and people were like, you need to be in it more, you need to be in it more, I was like, this feels impossible. Like, there's no way anybody's going to care about my story enough to want to watch me for this long. And I'm really thankful that, the entire team made me feel supported in that choice. They were like, look, if you trust us, we won't let you fall here, because there is an inherent level of risk that you assume by turning the camera on yourself. You risk coming off pretentious or like an asshole or self-centered. There's a lot of creative risk that comes with that. But also there's a lot of risk if the movie just doesn't do well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like, I remember leading up to Tribeca, I was having panic attacks because I was like, I was just freaking out because I was like, look, I like the movie, but we don't know how the world is going to respond to the movie.
Yeah.
And even though I had this team of people whose taste I trusted implicitly, people who I loved implicitly and would abide by, I would follow anywhere they told me to go. It was still like a thing where I wasn't convinced that they were going to be right. Even though in my gut, I was like, I feel like this is good. I feel like this is the movie that is better than the one that we initially set out to make. And, there's just an overwhelming amount of like pressure and anxiety when you are a participant in a documentary, if you're a subject of a documentary. And so this this movie was an exercise in empathy from so many angles. And so I feel like if I get to make another documentary again, the good thing is that I can literally say to people who I'm asking to go on camera and to go on this journey with me as a filmmaker, hey, I've literally been where you've been, and I know what it's like, and I'm here for you, and we're going to be partners in this endeavor in the way that we go about it. And it's totally changed the way that I approach the craft of documentary filmmaking.
So this is probably going to be a very nerdy question for only people that have spent some time trying to make something. But when you were in the editing for this film, obviously there's at a certain point where you couldn't deny your existence in this film. Was there a cut of this film for a little while where you tried to scrub yourself from it?
So let me just let the audience know, like, in case they've never heard of Chasing Amy, like what it's about.
Please
So
do. Yeah.
essentially, Chasing Amy is a film that is about my coming of age against the backdrop of Kevin Smith's 1997 cult classic, Chasing Amy. It saved my life as a closeted queer trans kid in suburban Kansas. Fast forward, 10, 15 years later, whatever the math is there. And I gave a TED talk about what Chasing Amy meant to me, and it set into motion the events of the documentary that you see, where I come of age against the backdrop of Chasing Amy for the second time while unpacking or analyzing its place in LGBTQ film history and what it means to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some ways that's like a very academic read of it, but when you watch it, it's very personal endeavor,
Mm-hmm.
and not one that I had anticipated being in at the level that it's at. And so you get to know, the love of my life in that film. You get to, see my mom. You get to see where I grew up. You get to see, what it means for a person to truly get to become themselves. And it's because this one inflection point at a critical point in my life where I can imagine that I have a future, which is very hard sometimes if you're a queer kid in bad circumstances, and whether that's facing harassment or facing physical violence, or your family's not accepting, whatever that looks like. That moment where you can imagine you have a future is everything. And Chasing Amy afforded me the idea that I had one, and that I would have things to look forward to, whether that was finding community, the idea that queer people were not just the punchline of a joke, or the idea that maybe I could be somebody who told a story that, had an impact like what Chasing Amy had on me. And so it's all very nebulous, but I promise if you go see it, it's a very personal story.
For Sav Rodgers, a queer kid growing up in Kansas, role models came from an unexpected source.
When I was 12, I had a movie where the gay and lesbian characters were good and funny and out. They were able to live as their authentic selves.
Chasing Amy.
Chasing Amy.
Chasing Amy.
The third film from director Kevin Smith.
It's about a guy who falls in love with a lesbian.
But Sav's about to find out. Life's not about finding your heroes.
Welcome to the house that Amy built.
It's about finding yourself.
I'm directing a project about the legacy of Chasing Amy as an LGBTQ film.
Do you find the film to be authentic to the LGBTQ community?
I find it authentic to the straight dude who falls for a queer woman community. No longer being a lesbian by meeting the right man.
That's gonna be controversial.
Ben Affleck's goatee was a bad idea.
Let's go into the movie.
Something that's problematic can still mean a lot in your development.
It was brave to portray somebody fluid.
Seeing that movie helped me figure out, oh, that's me.
That's gay.
This girl loves me.
It's cool to come to a place where a bunch of stuff changed your life. All right, let's go. That's where they have their big fight.
Well, we're beautifying it with our butts.
You were so supportive, and I was so alone in the world.
How wonderful that you found something in it.
The movie is amazing, but whatever moved you, there's a dark side too.
I can't erase the past.
You don't just get a pass for that.
I didn't know what I expected. I did not expect all this.
Maybe what's really troubling you is that your fragile fantasy might not be true.
Can we talk? This movie made me be honest with myself. Chasing Amy and chasing Amy. My butt has been where Ben Affleck's butt has been. Basically Ben Affleck. A little shorter.
And so, back to your question and remind me what the question was one more time.
So, throughout the process of editing this film, there's clearly a certain point where you can't deny your inclusion in it. But was there a version of this film where you were trying to scrub yourself from it?
I don't think there was ever a version where I was trying to scrub myself from it. There was a version of the film where I was trying to lean on me significantly less. And in the initial first cut of the film that we had, whatever the first 60 minutes were assembled, because for a long time we were just working on Act 1 and Act 2. And so the Act 1 had to be all about setting up Chasing Amy and what it means to people and what is this film and why do we care. And also somewhere throw in the idea that there was a guy who really cared about it. And that guy wasn't Kevin, it was me. And then it's going on the journey up to a certain point where then my life totally changes. And in that version, I was really trying to focus more on the stuff that I was initially interested in when we started the project, which was almost like the anthropological, research side, what does this mean to queer film history? What does this mean about representation, good or bad or whatever, right? And admittedly, that version was a lot less interesting. And when I got that cut back, I was like, fuck, I think I'm going to have to be in this a lot more than I thought. And but it's truly the result of like listening to the people around you who you trusted to help you tell the best version of the story. And so when you're getting that note over and over again, then it's like, okay, I've accepted that this is what the film is. How can we innovate from there? And what I absolutely loved, was getting to work with our editor Sharika Ajay Kumar. She is fucking awesome. She was brought in, and she did not know me before this process, which I also loved because I needed somebody to like who could be like really like honest with me about if a moment wasn't working. A big thing in the film was no unearned sentimentality, right? So I'm the harshest critic on myself, as many of us as artists are.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure, Michael, you look at your films and you're like, what the fuck? Like, absolutely not, right?
Yes, yes. There's a couple of them I can't watch. I just can't. Like, they're objectively good films. I just can't watch them.
Now imagine you're watching yourself go through second puberty, and it's some of the most uncomfortable moments of your life caught on film, and that was the uphill battle that I had, where I was like, oh my god, I can't watch this, holy shit. And so Sharika, though, we were usually really in sync on stuff where, if she had an idea, it was usually like the best version of that idea, where I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it, let's try this. Because she could look at it from an objective perspective, but she could also pull me back if I was like, absolutely not, like nobody's going to care about this, and she's like, Sav, just trust me, they're going to care about this, like it's going to work, like trust me. And when I say work, I mean like moments in the documentary where I'm like, there's no way you want to hear my perspective on this, there's no way you want to see my life at this juncture. And she's like, no, I'm telling you, they do. And that's the stuff that would test well internally with our team. And so yeah, I mean, we could have made 5 different versions of Chasing Amy. We could have made a version that was all about its place in LGBTQ film history that was admittedly more dry. We could have made a version that was just about Kevin's journey with it. We could have made a version that was just about queer film history at large, and the people who did not receive the same level of credit or success that Chasing Amy and or Kevin had at that time, because of the way the industry was structured, and the way that it in many ways continues to be structured. And so who gets power, who gets recognition, who doesn't. And so there's a lot there was a lot that was left on the cutting room floor that was compelling. But at the end of the day, the mandate that I had to author for this was like, okay, if it doesn't relate to my evolving relationship with Chasing Amy, then it has no place in the film. And so everything then became centered and became really lean for that 92-minute version that you saw and that people are going to get to see in theaters, and on VOD and blah, blah, blah. That is the version that you see, is that every scene has to be about that.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've been loving learning about your journey as a filmmaker is I love hearing filmmaking stories about people with humble roots. And I think if I could talk about myself here for a little bit, it's part of the reason why early on, when I first got into filmmaking, I think I responded so well to filmmakers like Kevin Smith and George Romero. Those are my 2 entry points into filmmaking. It was seeing Night of the Living Dead on television one night and thinking, I could do this. And it wasn't like a knock at the movie. It's like, but it was the first time I saw a movie that I could kind of see how the strings are being pulled. And then it was also around that time that I think we got, as a family, we got our first DVD player. So I could, the first time I saw a behind the scenes feature, and I was like, holy shit, people make these. And then I was like around 11 or 12 years old, and I decided that this was what I wanted to do with my life, was be involved in movies. And it was around that time too that I discovered Kevin Smith and his films, and he's still a bucket list guest of mine, hopefully one day on this show. But I learned screenwriting by reading his scripts, and because I was really enamored by his own version of coming from very humble roots. And because I think it's I think one thing I try to impart is a lesson on this podcast, even though it's not a filmmaking podcast, but I'd like to imagine that young filmmakers are listening. There's not one journey. Yeah, there is a lot of knowing the right people and being in the right place at the right time, but there's also just a lot of passion and hard work. And your story is filled with that passion and that hard work, and you're believing in yourself. And I felt all that when I saw this film. And your journey starts way earlier than when I first saw this film, but I want to bring us back to the Milwaukee Film Festival. And I told you this story off mic, but I think it still works. I think it still works here. So I was at the Milwaukee Film Festival as a member of the press, which feels weird to say. It's my first time getting a press badge somewhere.
Hell yeah, celebrate that win, man. That's great.
I am. Yeah, I am. Thank you. So I got a press badge, and I was just seeing so much stuff. And Robin, who was one of the coordinators at the Milwaukee Film Festival, me and her had become tight around that time, and she came up to me and it's like, she knew I was there to see Chasing Amy because she knew I loved Chasing Amy, and she's like, "Hey, do you want to meet Sav before the movie?" And I was like, "That feels weird. I haven't seen his movie yet." And I have to say, I'm glad that I didn't talk to you beforehand. I'm glad that I didn't pick your brain at all. I'm glad that I didn't try to get into your head. And if anything, I guess I'm a little sad that people might listen to this podcast and not get that experience, because going into that movie practically blind, I saw your trailer and I had an idea of what it was about, but experiencing that entire journey and then having you come out and do a Q&A, it was almost like this showmanship. And I appreciate that you didn't do something before the film. And I guess my question, because now I've just been talking for a little while.
That's so nice, by the way. I mean, thank you. That is so, nice of you to say. And I usually don't introduce the film. Because I came out in the movie as trans and I came out in real life as trans, and so usually for like the person going in completely blind, I like for them to like go through the journey of seeing my coming of age, so to speak, and then I come out and I'm just the dude talking to them, and I'm like, hey, thanks for being here, I appreciate that, in the same way that I really appreciate this conversation. And we have not remotely hit on anything that I think will ruin the film or anything for anyone who's listening to this. And I appreciate the platform, though, to come in and talk about craft, because that's not a conversation I usually get, because usually I get a lot of questions about like all the big feelings that the film evokes, which, by the way, are a lot, thankfully. And those are lovely questions to get, but I love that you're asking me about like process and like why I am thinking the way I'm thinking. Like, it's really nice, man. So anyway,
well,
not to interrupt your question.
No, it's fine. My question really was, was that a preconceived idea to not introduce the film? Was that something you were practicing? Because I'm sure by the time you came to Milwaukee, which hopefully you had a good time here, I imagine that was old hat at that point. You'd been showing the film. I'm sure I think I heard you say there in the Q&A you would pop in during certain moments to kind of get an idea of how the audience was reacting, but it felt orchestrated. And I want to know if it was something you had been working on, or if it was just kind of a happy accident that you ran with.
Like the idea that I wasn't going to come out beforehand.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it works for you. I mean, this is really helpful feedback, because normally nobody's like talking about like the presentation or whatever, unless they're like, talking about like how it shows up on screen and like how did we shoot it or whatever, right? Initially this first came up when we did our Tribeca premiere, and they were asking who wants to introduce the movie, and in a lot of cases a director will come up and they'll introduce the movie themselves, and they'll be like, hi, I'm so and so, and this is the movie I made, I hope you like it, right? They'll acknowledge the cast, they'll acknowledge the crew, and for most movies that makes perfect sense, and it does not make sense for our movie. And so because you see me as I am now, which is how I want people to remember me, but I was worried at first that people would be like confused, right? Of like, okay, this guy just said he's the director, but it seems clear that this 15-year-old boy is the director, right? And so what I didn't want was to, not that I think my transition is necessarily a spoiler or anything, but what I didn't want was to distract from the picture, you know? What I wanted is for people to just go in as open as possible, and then when we do the Q&A after, then that's the time to ask all the questions and to have all the feelings and everything. So what ended up happening at Tribeca, and this kind of set a precedent for most festivals where we had multiple team members, is that moment then went to a producer or my mom. So at Tribeca, my mom and one of our producers, Alex Schmitter, introduced the film at our first 2 screenings, which was lovely. I'm glad that, you know, my mom isn't always like interested in going up in front of people, but for her to see a packed house full of people who showed up to see your son's movie, like that was a really nice feeling. And for Alex to, you know, to be able to go up there and introduce it, or Carrie or Leela or Matthew or other producers to be able to go up and say, hey, I worked really hard on this movie and I hope you liked it. You know, I don't think a lot of producers are usually afforded that opportunity, or other crew members. One of the things is that we like played in Palm Springs, and talk about crossover appeal. There was a group of like 50 Gen Z film students from Spain who showed up. Like, it was like that portal scene in Avengers, right, where everybody's like coming through. Like, I was looking at the house half full, and I was like, oh, that's a bummer. And then like 50 people all come in, like speaking Spanish. And I looked at Riley, who's from Mexico City and speaks Spanish. I was like, oh my God, we need to bilingual, I don't know whose idea it was. Maybe it was Leela's idea, where we all just looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh, we need a bilingual introduction. And so people got to see Riley ahead of the screening and everything like that. And then I come out at the end, and, you know, a lot of the questions ends up being for me, which is totally fine. But it's that moment of getting to share, you know, the spotlight in some ways, but also, like, you know, give the spotlight to the programmer who worked their ass off to put together this program. I'll get so much credit for this movie for the rest of my life, whether people receive it positively or negatively or whatever. Like, that's all on me in some ways. But I love when it's a warm audience and you get to just, give the microphone to someone else, contrary to how much I'm talking right now.
Well, you even did that at the Q&A. Like, I loved that your partner got questions and they got to have their moment in the sun as well. I thought that was wonderful.
Oh, so, yeah, she's the best. I mean, and people will see that when they see the movie, just how awesome she is.
So there's a follow-up question to this question, but I want to start with, when you first had the itch to get into filmmaking, did you have any intention of doing documentary?
No, there was no intention for it. And it's interesting because I'm known as a doc guy now, and I'm like, well, this is just my first film. It's like, ideally, each film that I have the opportunity to do will feel distinct in some ways. And I don't plan on rehashing this in another film, although I'm sure common themes will arise for the kinds of stories that I'm interested in telling. But, when I dream, I don't necessarily dream in documentary. Also, documentary is not for the faint of heart. There is a lot of heartache associated with it because it's real people's story. And there is an awesome responsibility in trying to ensure that you're telling somebody else's story responsibly. And Chasing Amy is largely my story, and I still felt the weight of that responsibility at every turn. So in terms of like a fun sandbox to play in, documentary, I feel, again, that heft, that responsibility to it. And when I get to do narrative, that's where I feel like, the most fun, the most play, the thing that made me want to be a storyteller in the first place. That feeling when you're having a great D&D campaign, right? Like, that is the feelings that are evoked when I get to do something that's scripted. And with unscripted, it's like there can be a lot of fun and joy and love and all of these things, but often it's tough. It's tough for me emotionally.
And you touched on some things quite beautifully that I wanted. You mentioned that documentary is not for the faint of heart, and I feel like so many, and this is not a knock at anyone, so many young filmmakers are like, oh, let's go out and make a documentary because they think they can, knock it out in a couple afternoons. They can get some interviews and put something together. And I really want to touch on the craft of documentary because I feel like it's a very misunderstood art form. Uh, it's not a genre, it's a medium, is what I always tell people. It's just another way to tell your story. And you touched on, doing narrative a scripted film versus doing unscripted, and that's realistically one of the big reasons why documentary is so hard is you don't know your story. You can go in with an idea of what you want to tell, and then a poor interview could just ruin everything. It could be your key interview that this is going to be the story, and then it just falls. Or an interview that you weren't expecting is going to be the story that comes out. So I know it was a long time ago. Put me in the mindset of young Sav. What were you thinking when you're like, let's go make this documentary about Jason Amy?
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect. I mean, I had a gut feeling that it was the right move to make and that it was a story that only I could tell. But I also had no idea the emotional weight of telling this story, even just from my own perspective, let alone the stories that I am responsible for telling for the people who trusted me with their truths. And that includes like a lot of the key players in Chasing Amy. And so in some ways, I was so over my head, and you see it on screen. And also, that's part of the journey is that truth, that authenticity that you're capturing. And so, I will. I feel for every documentary that I get to make in the future, I'll be way more prepared than I was on Chasing Amy because I just wanted to tell a story. I just wanted to I thought it was going to be similar to scripted filmmaking in a lot of ways. And in some ways there's, parallels in terms of finding the story and making sure you're telling the best version of the movie and, spending time to make sure that you're getting it right. And also there's a whole other element of, oh my God, these are real people.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a weight to trying to ensure that you do everything as responsibly as possible. And that's hard. And it was hard for me to do it with my story, but it's also like Riley and I don't love watching this movie. It's like it's a movie we're very proud of, but it also reminds us of a lot of times in our lives that there have been strife and struggle. And it's hard. It's just fucking hard, man. Um, so if you're gonna do it, you need to try to think about. And I'm so lucky that I picked good people to make this movie with. I'm so lucky I picked good people to look out for me during the worst parts of this. When we were leading up to Tribeca, I was just like fully having panic attacks because I was so nervous about how the film would be received. I'd never done anything on this scale before. I'd never done anything that this many people would care about seeing. I didn't, everything was going right in so many ways, and I was like, oh no, I'm setting myself up for whatever's coming next. And I can't tell you the immense relief, and I could cry thinking about it. I cannot tell you the immense relief when we were sitting at the opening night party, which was packed. I have never been at an event where so many people wanted to talk to me in my life. And it was
Scary
all
feeling.
it was all positive and lovely.
Yeah.
And I was also like, holy shit, there are some people that do this every day, and that is their life. Like Kevin, and I'm like, oh my God, why? But it's lovely. It's wonderful when people respond to your work in that way. But I could cry thinking about the feeling that washed over me when our first 5 reviews came in the night of our premiere on like Rotten Tomatoes, and they were all positive. I mean, for months we had 100% positive reaction on Rotten Tomatoes. You know what I mean? And we've only had 2 bad reviews to date at the time of recording this, which is a privilege because very rarely does that get to happen. But the immense relief of like, oh my God, I didn't make a horrible mistake and fuck my whole life up by telling this story, by putting myself out there in this way, by being so earnest. I think people who are really like earnest, like I am, like we get burned a lot because I think people think we're stupid. I think people think we're dumb. Or
you're preaching to
like,
the choir, man, because I'm very similar to you in that way.
Yeah, it's like we're just trying to put our best foot forward and be nice to
Yeah.
people. And some people take that as like, wow, you're a fucking moron. And like they take advantage of what can be called good nature, right?
Yeah.
I'm not making a moral judgment on myself or anything like that, but I try really hard to be the person that you'd want to meet in this business and be kind and be thoughtful and to not be a total asshole. Everybody has bad days, but there was just this level of risk that I can't tell you was so fucking hard. And so I can't imagine the feeling of somebody who participates in a documentary and they didn't direct it. They had no creative stake in it. They had no control over it. And what that feels like, knowing that you're just asking the world to kind of judge you, it's an open vein in a lot of ways. And so someday, a lot through this process, I was like, I think I'm too sensitive to work in this business. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And yet I keep coming up with story ideas. And yet I keep coming up with scripted pitches, unscripted pitches. I keep writing. I keep doing these things because it's the only thing that I know how to do. And it's the only thing I want to do. and I'm really glad that this was a big swing that seems to have paid off. And I hope when people get to see it, that they're kind and empathetic, but also that they get something out of the film.
I love what you touched on, or you said that you sometimes feel like you're too nice for this business, because I've had the same thought. I remember, so years ago, Milwaukee Film, they used to do this program called Collaborative Cinema, where it was a very wonderful program where they allowed a high schooler to write a script to the best of their ability, and they had a bunch of high schoolers meet with working professionals and teach them how to better their scripts. And then from there, a filmmaker in Milwaukee got to pitch their idea of how they'd make one of these films. And I got to do it. And like my first day on set, we had like a $20,000 budget for a short film, which is insane to me. We had a generator the size of my living room, like all this stuff, and like the DI guy came up to me, and I'd never even had a person who was in charge of wrangling files up to that point. He came up to me and was like, hey boss, you want me to get you a cup of coffee? He's like, do you want me to get you a cup of coffee? Who am I? So I think this business needs more honest and that's not to say there's not people in the business who are like that, but I've had more than one friend tell me that I'm too nice to be a producer.
Oh, sure. And I just want to correct you real quick. I didn't say I was too nice to be in this business. There's so many nice, kind people in this business. I do think I might be too sensitive to be in this business.
Too sensitive. My mistake. I misquoted you.
No. But just to clarify, like, there are lots of good people in this business. A lot of them worked on our film. A lot of them work at the Milwaukee Film Festival. That was a wonderful experience. It gave me the best brisket sandwich I've ever had. It's
hell yeah.
It was great. But it was. I think the caring as a superpower is a double-edged sword, and so it's like it cuts both ways. And if you feel the depths of the emotion in one positive way, you also feel it on the backswing of like, fuck, what am I doing here? Am I supposed to? Am I supposed to be here?
All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about, without spoiling your journey throughout the film, I'd like to talk a little bit about Chasing Amy, just as a whole.
I'm prepared. I've done a bunch of research on this movie. I think I'm ready.
So my journey with Chasing Amy, if you don't mind me and talking about that for a little bit.
Michael, this is your show. I know, but here, but you keep like giving this caveat of like if you don't mind me, and I'm like, you're the storyteller. I'm along for the ride. This is a yes and situation.
It's Midwest nice, man. This is just what we do.
Look, I get it, but you don't have to apologize for taking up space on your show.
Fair enough. Okay, so my journey with Chasing Amy was Chasing Amy when I think probably was, and I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. I was going to say Chasing Amy might have been my the first queer movie I saw, and I don't even know if it necessarily counts as a queer movie having been made by a straight filmmaker. There's
the perennial question about authorship and authenticity.
Yes, but what I will say, it was one of the first movies that I had seen where being gay wasn't a punchline. Like, don't get me wrong, the film does let its gay characters be funny, but it's not just a punchline. So that movie kind of rocked my world for that reason, because my uncle was gay. I spent a lot of time with his friends. He had a lot of like cross-dresser friends that hang out at his house. So I was very familiar with it, but I'd never seen it portrayed on a movie before. And I just remember thinking, in a way, it kind of opened up the floodgates of like, oh man, Kevin Smith, at least to my knowledge, when I saw the movie, it's like, well, I think he's a straight filmmaker. Man, you could tell a story about anything. And he has so much heart to it. And he has a lot of love for his characters, yada yada yada. And then and it was a movie that really meant a lot to me. And because I thought there was a lot of genuine heart to it. And then I watched a couple years ago, and all the things I still liked were there. But then I was feeling weird about it. I was like, oh man, some of the stuff does not feel like the story that he should be telling. And I had mixed feelings on it after that. And then honestly, your documentary kind of pushed me back towards how I originally felt about it. So there's been this nice like little pretzel with Chasing Amy. And all of this to wonder, has your appreciation or affection changed on this movie? Changed about Chasing Amy? And specifically because one thing I think you do very well is you have no problem letting other voices say, here's all the reasons I don't like this film, or queer people don't like this film. Because you definitely say a lot about why you like it and why people do like it. But I also love that you give that other side of it. And I'm kind of curious, has your perception on Chasing Amy as a movie, not necessarily your nostalgia based on it, has it changed at all?
So I'm a big fan of the video game series Mass Effect, and there's a great
quote.
Beat
the first one.
Hell yeah. Okay, so you haven't gotten to this quote yet. I think it's in Mass Effect 2 or 3. And somebody says something like human beings are fascinating because you can have three, if you have three humans in a room, you can have six opinions on the same subject, right? Meaning that, things are complicated and human beings can really recognize the complicated nature of things. So, first of all, I want to validate some things, right? For both you and the audience. If there is a film that is deemed problematic, right, which is a deeply imprecise term, meaning that is inclusive of a lot of things, from really mild offenses or things being a product of its time to full-blown homophobia, transphobia, racism, ableism, et cetera, right? If you get something from that film, for the most part, you're probably fine, because our relationship with cinema is subjective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are defending overt racist propaganda like The Birth of a Nation, right?
That was what I was thinking of.
Right. Like, there are exceptions to the rule. I don't think we really need people defending The Birth of a Nation. That was overt Ku Klux Klan propaganda at the time it was made. We don't really need people being like, but have you considered? No, we've considered it. That movie's been around for a long time. I don't think we need to do much more considering. You can study that film. We can learn from that film in some ways, but there are many other films that teach the things that supposedly are, that were allegedly groundbreaking about that film at the time, and have done it in a much better way, right? So, with
it did its thing, still shitty,
horrible. One of the most damaging films and examples of propaganda in cinematic history.
Agreed.
So, with very few exceptions, right? Cinema is largely just a subjective experience.
Yeah.
It is about what we are taking away from a story. And protagonists and actions and the things that happen on screen are for us to reflect on our own humanity, to consider a story, whether to be entertained, to be moved, to think differently, to be disgusted. An artist's point of view is trying to evoke some sort of reaction, right? And every single film that exists is a product of its time. That is a fact. That is indisputable, right? Chasing Amy is a product of of 1997 and where we were in American society and what it looked like for a straight man who was empathetic to queer people to tell a story from his own perspective and to include queer people. That is what Chasing Amy is, right? And you can have reactions about the way that the film does or does not do things the way that you think would be most effective, and that's great. And we can have a conversation about it, and it inspires cultural change. And we can look back on Chasing Amy and see how far we've come as a society in some ways, but also look at what was considered progressive to many people in 1997. We can also acknowledge, the things that we wish it did, right? But I don't love spending time personally on wishing films did things differently. I love looking at films with from the artistic intent of the director and being like, well, did you accomplish what you were trying to accomplish, right? And usually the films I love best are when I feel that alignment from what it seems like a director is trying to do and the story that they're trying to tell and how that resonates with me in my gut, right? Or in my heart. And so I don't need Kevin Smith to be Cheryl Dunye. I don't need Kevin Smith to be Andrew On. I don't need Kevin Smith to be anybody but Kevin Smith. And so when I watch that, I see, yeah, this is a Kevin Smith film about this, and it resonated with me at this time, and blah, 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 right? The whole story of Chasing Amy. And so, when I hear critiques about Chasing Amy, I'm like, yeah, that's fair. For the most part, I'm like, yeah, that's fair. And it doesn't change the fact that it saved my life as a closeted queer trans kid. It doesn't change that. And so I think it's a both and situation where it's like, I think that a lot of the choices in Chasing Amy are uniquely Kevin, and it fucking rocks in some ways in that way. As for my relationship with Chasing Amy now, when you make a movie your job for over 6 years, your relationship to it is bound to change because it becomes more work. So Chasing Amy is no longer my feel-good movie. It's no longer the movie I turn to for comfort because I've spent so much time analyzing it and going over it with a fine-tooth comb and making it my job to talk about and getting to know the people behind it. Like, the relationship has changed, and that's okay. But also, when I think about Chasing Amy in terms of my life, right? If you think of what takes up your life or your time as a pie chart, right? This is a visual thing here. Sorry, this is an audio podcast. So if you're looking at the things that take up your life and bring fulfillment in your life as a pie chart, right?
Yeah.
Look at me at age 12. Chasing Amy took up a significant chunk of that pie chart. And now, in that chunk where Chasing Amy used to take up so much space, we have things like finding community. Chasing Amy was temporary community when I needed it. It was a stand-in for a strong sense of self and courage and the ability to be myself. I've gotten past that point in a lot of ways of needing to come out twice. Chasing Amy takes up a good chunk of that pie chart now. Making my own films takes up a big chunk of that pie chart. Tongue-tied here. My relationship with my wife is a big chunk of that. My friendships, all of these things. And so what I will always thank Chasing Amy for, and to the people who made it for, is for buying me time to live up to that vision for the future that I hoped I would get to have. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I have so much now because I love that movie. And it's also okay for our relationships to things to change. If I was still as obsessive and diehard over Chasing Amy as I was at the beginning, I don't know if anybody would still want to talk to me, man. Like, if I still was in that state of arrested development as a 12-year-old talking about Chasing Amy, I don't think that would make for a very interesting film, and I don't think that would make for a very interesting work, and I don't think I would be an interesting person to talk to. But I'm so thankful for what that film has done for me and for countless other people. And so I try not to fall into like a nostalgia trap of like, well, everything was better when my relationship to it was this. And it's like, no, I have so much because I loved this movie. And because the people who worked on it were willing to give me their time, their energy, and to trust me with their story. That is kind of where things sit with me. And I think it's okay for things to change and for us to evaluate our relationships to films. But I don't think we need to be twiddling our fingers and feeling really self-conscious about it. It's like, yeah, like this movie moved me, and it may not have moved you, and that's okay. But to keep having that conversation and engaging with cinema in that earnest way, it's going to create a lot more room for new favorite movies and new things that can change your perspective and change your life.
Yeah. And on this show, we talk a lot about problematic faves, where we talk a lot about just because, like, this goes back to what you said earlier, just because something is problematic doesn't mean it's inherently bad, because problematic is also a spectrum in itself. And there's so many different elements to that. And I'm a firm believer that intent goes a long way. D.W. Griffith knew the fucking movie he was making. And he knew, and he made it to be hurtful. The things that he did for cinema are such a minor note in that film, because he wasn't thinking about any of that. He was trying to be hurtful. Something like Chasing Amy, yeah, Kevin was, can't speak for the man, but I've listened to him talk about it, I've listened to his commentaries. He wasn't trying to be hurtful. His heart was in the right place. And I'm also a big proponent of, if you are aware that something is problematic and you're not ignoring that or running from it and are willing to have that be part of the dialogue, that's a good step forward. When I was young, John Hughes was a writer I learned a lot from. And he has got some stuff in his filmography that is not easy to watch. 16 Candles is not easy to watch in 2024. But the things that I learned from that film are still there.
Yeah. And it's, and while I can't speak to authentically, because I haven't, spent my life dedicated to talking about the ways in which D.W. Griffith is a monster, but peripherally know that, I can speak to, what it feels, for my own, attempts at scholarship in film in my own ways as a documentarian, but also my research on Chasing Amy and all the paths that led me down in terms of researching new queer cinema. There's a lot of stuff that I think if you are a marginalized person, you have to choose whether or not to empathize with or not empathize with, right? What your limits are and what your lines are. And so when I talk about like problematic cinema, quote unquote, everybody has their own line in the sand to draw. If Chasing Amy is a film that bothers you and you have a fucking reason for it, you're not going to get any arguments from me. If you don't want to watch films by people who have done bad things to people and have caused a lot of harm, that's a great line in the sand to draw. And I'm not here to police that, and I don't really think anybody else should be policing it. But I do think that we have to consider the wider spectrum of storytelling, right? And the experiences that we cut ourselves off from sometimes in the interest of moral purity. There's nothing that's ever entirely morally pure, right? There's not ever anything that didn't have, somebody that, like there wasn't a behind the scenes stories where somebody was like put off one day, or, it's messy, it's human, it's hard. And so while everybody has their own line in the sand, and I think we have to respect that, I also think, there's so much that we can learn from cinema and storytelling and all of the imperfections that come with being a human being. And that's some real shit. That's some real shit. I mean, I think about all the stuff that, that is stuff that I've seen where it's like, oh, this brilliant movie was ruined by this like little bit of transphobia that they decided to throw in here. You know what I mean? Where you're going back and you're watching a movie and you're like, holy shit, why did they put that in there? The movie was so good up until that point. And I can learn from a movie like Soap Dish. I can learn from a movie like that while also not having a transphobic reveal at the end that's really tropey and shitty,
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a lot of things about that movie that's fucking phenomenal other than the ending. And it's like, and that's my line in the sand to draw. And it's really subjective and personal to each person. But as a filmmaker, I'm going to choose to opt in to engage with stuff, even if there is that shittiness involved. I don't know. Like there's no one perfect answer. So I'm not here to prescribe people to tell them what to think, but that's the way that I choose to engage. And I'm not interested in letting soap dish hurt me, and I also understand somebody that would be hurt by that movie. And we all draw our lines in the sand.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. So we're going to start wrapping up here soon. I have as I said before, I like to believe that filmmakers are listening to this show or just fans of cinema, and I think there's a lot of people out there who might want to thinking about getting their hands dirty by making a film. And I listen to a lot of film podcasts, and people will always ask the question, like, what's a piece of advice you have for young filmmakers? And it's usually something along the lines of don't give up and do stuff like that. I'm going to ask you questions similar to that, but change it a little bit. And I will give you an example of my own.
All right.
So, what is a piece of practical advice you would give someone who's trying to make their first film? And I have one I can tell you, a good piece of advice that I was given when I made my film for a Milwaukee film. And it was the first time I was really working like a 16-hour day. I was working with a lot of people, and it can be overwhelming. And I had my assistant director came up to me and said, "Hey, there's a lot of things I could tell you, but if I can give you a practical piece of advice," he's like, "bring an extra pair of socks." And I was like, "What the hell kind of advice is that?" And he goes, "Hear me out. You're shooting on a long day. Lunch comes around. You're gonna be happy you have a clean, dry pair of socks." So shout out to Lance Miller who gave me that advice. So all of this to say, do you have a practical piece of advice, even if it's something goofy, like have a second pair of socks that you give a young filmmaker?
Gosh, it's so hard to answer questions like these because they can often, sound pithy, or like, oh yeah, just shoot on your iPhone, anybody can do it, and it's like, well, it's a lot of work that goes into the shit. But the second pair of socks thing is great. I did that. Yeah, I think I had heard that early in my career too, and they love telling PAs to do shit like that. I love it. Let me think.
I know I sprung this on you.
No, I've been swearing this whole show. Is that allowed? Or are you gonna?
Oh yeah, that's cool. It's fucking cool.
Okay, cool. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure. Not ruining your ad revenue potential here. Let's see.
There was a period of time we were on television. So back when I had a co-host, we were on public access in Maryland because my co-host was he was the guy running the public access station. He needed content. But he'd have to go through our episodes and manually bleep out every time I swore. And I knew that, so I'd swear more just to give him more work.
Oh man. I love public access. Public access rules.
It does.
I mean, other than don't be an asshole, which is great life advice, I would say. Like genuinely, like think about other people and how they are gonna feel by the things that come out of your mouth. Like try to be like try to be the person that you would want to be talking to on set. Try to talk to people the way that they would want to be spoken to.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah, but there's a better one in there.
Treat your PAs nicely.
Yeah, treat everybody nicely.
Yeah.
I guess practical advice is I feel like everything I have is because I really care about relationship building. I really care about developing like a genuine relationship with whoever I'm talking to. And again, like that earnestness, it doesn't work for everybody, and that's how I know it's like, all right, we're probably not going to vibe. I'm not trying to win people over who are like mean to me. However, when you're trying to build relationships, lateral networking, aka networking across the level that you are currently working at, is going to be way more effective in terms of building satisfying long-term friendships, relationships, rapport with coworkers than if you're just trying to talk to the people at the top of the pyramid, because they don't care. they're in a different phase of life. They do not care. Maybe they'll mentor you, maybe they'll be kind to you. You want to, show up, be respectful, etc. But get to know your peers, because those are the people who you're going to be coming up through the industry with. Assistants don't stay assistants for long. They become executives. They go on to run studios in a normal functioning system. They go on to be hiring for crews. They go on to become department heads. And you want to be building genuine relationships with people who are working at the same level you are. And so I would just say that, like, don't be an asshole, but also be cool to the people that you are working with, because they're going to be coming up with you, and they're going to be the ones who, decide whether or not you get a job or an opportunity, or if you want a warm connection somewhere. Like, if you can genuinely be a person that they would want to be friendly with, then that's gonna really help, because it is a relationships based business. And some people are like really cynical about that it's a relationships based business, but the business essentially functions as you are perpetually being asked to stake your credibility on a recommendation. And if you're going to recommend somebody, you want to be able to recommend them with your full chest and say, hey, I really stand by this person. This is cool. If a filmmaker buddy asks me, hey, you went on Michael's podcast, how was it? I'll be able to say, you know what? It was such a lovely conversation and a pleasant experience. And I felt really cared for. And like, he was really interested in talking to me. That is going to go a long way than if Michael was a jerk to me before the mic was hot, and then I'm just sitting here like, what the hell? Why am I on this podcast with this person? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I can recommend you, Michael, with my full chest, and be like, actually, Michael's like fucking awesome. I really enjoyed talking to him. We talked about craft. He was really, kind about the movie. He kept in touch with me over email after we met in Milwaukee, et cetera, et cetera. And that's basically how it works in mass all the time in this business. And so don't be a fucking asshole.
I think that's a great way to put it. So I've been telling people about Chasing Amy since I saw it at the Milwaukee Film Festival. I've been
Hell yeah.
It's in this weird space where it technically came out in 2023, but I don't consider a film's year until it can be seen by the masses. So I think if things go according to plan, it will be on my list for favorite films of 2024.
Yes.
But it's getting to the point where people can hopefully see this soon. So you told me about some of these dates. The first one coming up, November 1st. What date is that? November 1st. Is that, you said,
November?
theatrical?
Yeah, November 1st, we're coming to movie theaters, aka please leave your house and go support it at your local art house cinema or your local chain, wherever's playing it in your area. I've seen a lot of screenings of this movie, both virtual and in real life. And I do think that, and Quentin Tarantino said this, I didn't make this up, but there is something to being in a movie theater to go see a movie, because it's not a disposable experience. You are feeling all of the same feelings as the people around you, or a lot of the same feelings. And so November 1st, we're going to be in movie theaters. We're going to have a 30-day theatrical window. So you'll be able to see us all throughout the month of November. And we're really excited to bring the movie to a lot of places. And we want to try to show it as widely as we possibly can, though we are a limited release. But we'll definitely be in places like New York, LA, Kansas City, where I'm from. We want to show in the South, the Midwest. We want to show in the Southwest, where I live right now. So we're trying to go everywhere. And we hope that you take a chance on this movie and come see it and enjoy a hopeful trans boy coming of age story against the backdrop of Kevin Smith's film, Chasing Amy.
Perfect. And then shortly after that, a hop, skip, and a jump right before the holidays, or right sandwiched between the holidays, we have December 7th. It's going to have its digital premiere, video on demand.
Yeah, it won't be VOD. It'll be like a live digital event. So basically it'll be a tick. Yeah, it'll be a digital screening through an app called Kino. We'll put everything on the website at chasingamydoc.com, so that you can get tickets to that. But effectively, it's going to be like an eventized like digital screening that's accessible everywhere around the world. So if we don't come to your local movie theater, or if you see it in the movie theater or you saw it at a festival and you want to see it again, you'll be able to see it through there. You'll be able to watch it at home and like buy a ticket for like 12 or 13 bucks. It's going to be fun. We're going to have like a pre-show and after show. It's going to be really cool. And it'll be like a fun experience where you get to, connect with people digitally. Again, like you can have a great experience digitally, but come out to the movies too.
Yeah. I'm weird in that I'd rather see the smaller, quieter films in a theater. Like, I have a pretty good home theater at home. I'm doing okay,
Yeah.
so like seeing Dune or the Marvel films at home is perfectly fine. But I'd rather see these smaller films that, one, need the help, and two, that demand a little more focus.
Yeah.
Because the movie theater is the only time that I'm completely in on whatever's in front of me.
That brings up a great point because, there's a lot going on in Chasing Amy. It is a very layered story, and I kind of feel like if you're dicking around on your phone watching it, you might actually miss something. And so, like, kind of giving it your complete attention, I think will make the story sit in richer. And so that's one of the things that I love about playing in movie theaters. Is like, no, it's actually not appropriate for you to be on your phone. It's not a rerun of the Golden Girls that you've seen 100 times.
Yeah. And it's more than just, in another filmmaker's hand who didn't have a personal connection to this film, it could have easily just been a nice, supplemental documentary on a new edition of Chasing Amy. But this is a lot more. And if it's playing in Milwaukee or even Chicago for its theatrical run, I want to go see it again because I really enjoyed it. And then I know you don't have any dates yet, but I'm really hoping for a physical media release. As I told you off mic, I do physical media reviews. I talk about aspect ratios more than anyone on TikTok, I can guarantee. And I'd like to do a review for this when it comes out, so I hope it gets a physical media release so I can place it right next on to Chasing Amy on my shelf.
Well, I'm hoping that our physical media release is going to be really kick-ass. I don't want to put out anything half-hearted that isn't exactly the kind of movie that I'd want to buy on physical. So I'm really excited for you to be able to own a copy in your hands, and for me to be able to place copies, in a library, in a rental store, whatever. That would be the greatest privilege. I saw Chasing Amy thanks to physical media. And I want to be able to people to actually own the movie in their fucking hands. So I'm glad that we're aligned on that, Michael.
Definitely. It's always been kind of been my goal to, even though physical media is not the thriving thing it once was, but it's now a boutique thing. It's my goal to one day try to moderate commentaries. So I want physical media to stick around. So I want people to go out and buy this, so people will keep pressing these things, so I can have my dream and Sav can have his dream of more physical media in this world. Hey man, I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
I feel the same way, Michael, and I don't think your pipe dream about commentary is a pipe dream. I think it's very accomplishable, and you'd be surprised what you can fucking manifest. This movie was all the results of manifestation and being like, I think this is possible, and having the audacity to do it. So I'm excited to hear your commentary on a number of exceptional films.
Oh, let's hope so. And I've also just proven, and you're a perfect example of that, by being the squeaky wheel can get you a long way. I just randomly at the end of Chasing Amy, I was like, hey, I want to talk to you more, and I just kept bothering you until it happened.
You know what? It was not a bother whatsoever, but I do appreciate like your patience like with me like getting this scheduled. Because it's hard out there right now. Indie
It
filmmakers are
is.
doing a lot of jobs. You as press, you're doing a lot of jobs right now. But, the fact that, you just came up to me, said what you wanted, I was like, yeah, we can do that. Hell yeah, let's go.
Perfect. And anytime you ever come visit Milwaukee again, let me know, and I'll take you out for dinner or something. But I appreciate your time. Everyone should go check out Chasing Amy. If you've never seen Chasing Amy, I think you should go check that out as well. But this is such a wonderful little accompaniment film that I think it could be a very enlightening double feature evening of and someone should do that. So if they haven't done it already, do a double feature somewhere. That would be super cool. But everyone, thank you for listening. If you want to, if by this point everyone should know where to follow the show. Shameless Picture Show on TikTok, Shameless Picture Show on Instagram. You can find me, Michael_Viers on Instagram. Sav, where can people follow Chasing Amy?
People can follow Chasing Amy at Chasing Amy Doc on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter if people still go there, and Facebook. We know there's lots of folks still on Facebook. And then if you want to follow me, I'm at Sav Rodgers Film on Instagram.
Very cool. Well, everyone, be sure to come back. Can't talk today. It's the end of the workday. Make sure everyone comes back for the next exciting episode of the Shameless Picture Show. Shame Time, Shame Plays, Shameless Picture Show. And then an extra special thanks to fellow podcaster and friend of the show, Austin Proctor, who actually had edited this episode. So if you want to support Austin Proctor and everything he does, be sure to check out the Frightmares podcast. I am a occasional co-host on that show, but he does one of my favorite podcasts about the horror genre, and it should be one of your favorite podcasts too. So thanks a lot for Austin Proctor for editing this episode.
The Shameless Picture Show is recorded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Easton, Maryland, and is hosted and produced by Nick Richards and Michael Viers. Today's episode was edited by Michael Viers. Our opening theme music was written especially for us by The Directionals, with narration by Zach McClain. The end credit music you're enjoying at the moment was generously provided by my friends in the band 10 Speed. The Shameless graphic design is masterfully done by Amanda Viers. An extra special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and to our generous sponsors. We are on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Google Play, and Libsyn. You can find links for all these amazing people in the description below.